Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us on this special edition of the Resistance Bureau. Today, we are sitting down with Kenyan political commentator Patrick Gathara, one of Africa's best-known artists and a defender of free expression. You may have read his expert analysis in a number of global publications, including the Washington Post and Al Jazeera, to name just a few, as well as on his popular Twitter feed, which I encourage all of you to follow. Our team is so pleased to link up with Patrick today in order to get some clarity on what actually happened in Kenya this past week, cutting through the noise, the mixed reporting, and some of the fake news that has been out there, and also to learn about the latest political and judicial developments and what we should expect in the coming weeks. Patrick, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. How are you feeling?
I'm pretty good. Thanks a lot for having me.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, let's just dive right into this. Our first question, I think a lot of our listeners will know, of course, that last Monday, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, the body which is tasked with managing Kenya's vote, announced that Deputy President William Ruto had won, narrowly edging out five-time presidential challenger Raila Odinga. A generally drama-free election day on August 9 then, of course, took a turn with several electoral commissioners refusing to certify the results. Obviously, it seems to me on the outside looking in, there's a bit of tension prevailing in the country. So in practical terms, what are you seeing and what comes next? Is there a court challenge underway? Do you think it has merit? And if you could take us through this unfolding process and what those of us on the outside looking in should really be paying attention to in the coming days.
Okay. So thanks for having me on this. Just a brief background on how we got here. So obviously we had our elections on August 9th last week. As you do know, there was it was very calm during the voting process, but it always is. All our elections, problems never crop up on during the voting. It's normally during the counting and tallying up of the figures that we have issues. So yeah, there was a bit of tension, but a lot of it was because of sort of the delayed announcement of the results. So it took about a week for that, 6 days actually, for the results of the presidential race to be declared. And that because the tallying process was very, very slow. They had to verify all the forms that they had, confirm whether or not they were genuine, and supposedly they did before they announced. One thing to note about this election was the transparency, at least post-voting. So all these forms were put online. Anybody could access it. Anybody could add up the figures. So for once, anybody who wanted to and who had the capacity to, because it's actually over 46,000 forms, could have known earlier on who had won. Everything was online. But there has been now a dispute, as you noted, first by members of the commission who are obviously working with or coordinating with Azimio on this. It was obvious in the press conferences that they had. So the electoral.
When you say they were coordinating with Azimio, what does that mean for someone who may not know what that means? What do you mean by that?
Okay. The two main coalitions that were battling it out for the presidency is Kenya Kwanza, which is led by William Ruto, who was declared the winner, and the other one is Azimio la Umoja, which is led by Raila Odinga, the losing candidate. Now there are two others. Candidates in this election, but they really don't matter. They scored less than 1% of the votes, very tiny showing. But anyway, it's clear. Azimio and Raila Odinga have rejected the results. And then we have these four commissioners out of a commission that's made of, so it's actually a majority, who come out and they say they've disowned the result as well. They say they weren't consulted in it, that the chairman was basically making up his own figures. But it was clear, I think, when they had their press conference that they were coordinating it with Azimio. They had it around the same time. The sort of Azimio press conference came immediately after the one by the commissioners. It was the commissioners' press conference was actually screened at the venue of Raila Odinga's press conference, and even the wording they used was pretty much identical. So I don't think there's any doubt that they were coordinating. So I mean that speaks to whether we can actually believe them, whether we think they're credible. Some of the figures that they issued were pretty ridiculous. Their mathematics seems to be quite dodgy. And the central contention, I think, and this is where for me it really where we need to pay attention,
Okay.
is whether what was posted on the IEBC portal, that's the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, that's the commission running the election, whether what they put online were actually the genuine forms that were there at polling stations. I think the entire court case, because Raila Odinga has said they will go to, or Azimio have said they'll go to court over this. They'll go to the Supreme Court, which is the only avenue that they have to legally challenge the outcome. I think they will. That will be the main question. They've been saying that it was rigged, that those forms were not necessarily true, that they have their own tally. They've got the genuine forms and examples of sort of duplicate forms with different numbers and stuff like that. But they haven't provided any of this publicly. They say they're waiting for the court case, which is quite a big change. If you look at the 2017 election, where Odinga actually challenged the election, actually won the case and got the election annulled. From almost the second day after voting, they were already putting out their case to the public that this was a stolen vote. They were on TV, they were showing the forms, they were claiming formulas had been used to change things, etc. This time it's been virtual silence on their end, apart from just the general allegation that it's been rigged. They haven't given any real specifics about how they know this. So it's a big difference. So just going forward, and I know this has been quite a long answer. Looking forward, so they have to file a Supreme Court, a challenge at the Supreme Court by Tuesday, I believe, at the latest. To date, they still haven't filed it. They had 7 days from when the election was declared. So once they file that, the Supreme Court will have 14 days to adjudicate this. It's quite a tight timeline. It has been problematic before, the timeline, because in 2013, when again Odinga challenged the outcome of the election, but unsuccessfully at that time, one of the big setbacks that he suffered was that the IEBC, which is the custodian of the forms, that he needed to make his case, refused to give them to him, and he had to go to court to get them compelled to give them. And it came out of that 14 days that the Constitution says is a time limit that the Supreme Court has. So by the time he actually presented the bulk of his case, the court said, well, we really don't have time to listen to it. The Constitution says 14 days, we've got to stick by that. And so his case was actually never heard. And I think probably this time, as they did as well in 2017, they're taking the time probably to prepare first, make sure you've got all the forms. It's a bit easier now because pretty much everything is online. But make sure that you by the time you file and the case starts, you're actually ready to go, because that's a really, really tight timeline.
Thank you so much for that. I think notwithstanding some of the issues you were just laying out and what to be on the lookout looking forward, based on what I have read and based on my experience, it seems that many domestic and international observers have asserted that the election, which took place on August 9, was the most transparent and most professionally conducted in Kenya's history. I was personally impressed with the conduct of poll workers and presiding officers on election day. I managed to observe about several dozen polling stations in Kisumu, which is in Western Kenya, of course, and came away, really quite impressed. Nevertheless, there are some critics, and you've already mentioned some of the issues that have arisen. And I'll put you on the spot a little bit. For example, you recently wrote in Al Jazeera that Kenya has so much potential, but seems to be intent on self-sabotage at every turn. I was wondering what you meant by that, and how that sort of fits into the broader issue of the election and its aftermath.
Um, for me, I think it's that there's always I mean, Kenya is sort of a story of two steps forward, one step back.
Mhm.
Whether we're talking about elections, democracy in general, So if you think about the 2010 Constitution, we passed it in 2010. And then the very first election after we passed it, we elect people who are indicted by the ICC for crimes against humanity. Sometimes it boggles my mind how this country, works.
Yeah,
I think when it comes to elections, um, we've got to keep in mind that voting day really has never been a problem, and even in 2007, voting day was not an issue,
yeah,
well, actually, I shouldn't say never, because if you think of the 1990s, when people used to be attacked, killed, displaced so that they wouldn't actually get to the polls. But I think since 2000, at least 2002, we haven't had a problem on voting day. Problems really come when it is about counting, tallying, and transmitting the result. So the result at the polling station is final, but how does it actually get to the people who make the announcements about the final who won? And don't forget, it's normally always the presidential election.
yeah,
We have 6 elections going. The other 5, that's the governor, MP, women's representative, MCA, and senator, never seem to generate the sort of angst that the presidential race does. And that obviously has its own historical reasons for it.
yeah,
But yeah, the presidential election specifically and the counting and transmitting of results from there is what the reforms that we had done after the violence of 2008 was meant to fix. You know, I think this particular election, especially because of the fact that they put up these forms online, and that everybody was anybody, as I said, who had the capacity and who wanted to do it could actually add up, and our media was doing it. Till at some point they stopped, and they never really explained why
yeah,
they stopped. you know, Anybody could have called the election. You know, Now the question for me, and this is where I get a bit worried, is whether it was all for show, whether the sort of whether we will find out from the court case that what we saw as transparency was just a game, was just sort of
yeah,
a screen. So they just put up forms that are not genuine, and we ended up getting plagued. So that's my worry. From what I've heard, it's unlikely. Lots of people have been going through those forms. I've been going through the original forms. The result have been are fitting within what an observer group called the election observer group, sorry,
yeah.
ELOG.
Elon.
Yeah, what they say, what they had predicted. Would kind of be the result. So it seems to be in queue with that.
Yeah,
So I am really hoping that the election is upheld, because if it is not, I don't see how IBC would survive that. I imagine that the fact that they have actually gone out and said, here it is, everything that we asked for, which is the entire transparency shebang they did, you
Yeah.
know. And if they don't actually, if it turns out that it was all a sham, um, I think our entire electoral system, our entire political system, I don't see how it would ever, I mean, it would take a really long time to recover any credibility for it.
Yeah. And that's actually a really good segue to what I wanted to get your insights on next, because I often read and hear from folks that Kenya, and especially its elections, are much bigger than the country itself, right? We so often hear that Kenya is a so-called anchor of democracy in the region. It's a platform for stability in an otherwise troubled region. And you can point to a number of issues that are happening. And I've talked to many activists and political leaders across the continent who will tell me the same. So Kenya, whether you like it or not, it really does seem to have outsized importance, right? So I wanted to ask you, are you and perhaps other Kenyans in your circle, or is this a more general feeling? Are they and are you aware of this burden, and how does this impact your role and responsibilities as a democratic citizen?
Um, I think uh, we're becoming aware of it. I don't think it's a major sort of burden on us. I don't think many people spend a lot of time thinking about what other countries will make of this.
Yeah.
But I think in general, when you look at, for example, when Malawi annulled their presidential election and they cited the Kenyan case, it was, I think, pretty clear if Kenya hadn't done it, that it would have been unlikely that Malawi would have. So we do, in a sense, set some pace. And I think many Kenyans have prided themselves as, we are the largest economy, most developed, whatever, in our region, and stuff. But when it comes to the elections, those are very sort of um, uh, internal sort of things. I think for a lot of people, the how the world sees it is, in fact, it can be sort of, it can move things to very ridiculous levels. So you think
Yeah.
about again the 2013 election, which was won by Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto. You know, two people are indicted by the ICC. The whole world basically comes down and says, you really cannot elect these guys. And what do Kenyans do is they actually sort of, this is turned into a whole anti-colonial, anti-Western thing, so that they are trying to interfere and all of that stuff. And that really had traction because I think for many people, the election is sort of our own internal thing. It has nothing to do with the rest of you guys.
Yeah.
And that's why what I think that's what I'm saying. The opinion, the views of the rest of the world, how they see us, how they want to, whether what lessons they take out of this. I think for many Kenyans, really a secondary consideration, if at all.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that insight. And, when we have these sorts of conversations, I personally always like to end on a very positive note. So hopefully we can do that here. And I wanted to ask you, what gives you hope moving forward for Kenya? And do you think Kenya, despite the issues and concerns you've discussed here today, could still emerge with a stronger set of democratic institutions, perhaps building on some of the more positive outcomes from the August 9 election? Could that prove to be a foundation going forward, a stable foundation to further build and consolidate democracy in East Africa and in Kenya specifically? Would love your thoughts on that.
Um, I think it really depends on what happens with the Supreme Court and the case that Odinga and Azimio prosecute there. If Odinga wins, if this is shown to be a sham, I think it's really going to destroy the IEBC. I don't think they come out of this. There's no way they would survive that. It will be the second election that they've run that's been annulled, and that's been shown that they basically have ignored laws or have, in fact, in this one, if they lose it, it's like it would be like they've basically perpetrated a scam on the entire country. I don't think they would survive it. But that said, I think if it is upheld, I think Kenya comes out very strong, much stronger, in two ways. First, it's building on the precedent of 2017, that elections can be annulled, which was a big step for us that established a bar. Now this establishes another bar for
Right.
how elections should be run, for the transparency that we should expect out of elections. And I think that is a really, really good thing, for us. I don't think if this is upheld, we are going to have another election where we don't have forms put online. I think all elections from now on will have independent tallying, which is something that we've always wanted, and especially the pressure will be on media to actually be calling elections sort of as they do in the US, and I think the visibility of the IEBC as a sort of management body sort of diminishing, so that people stop caring so much about, who are the commissioners, all the nitty gritty about that, because we've established a fundamental transparency bar within the IBC. So that for me is going to be a big deal if it is upheld. The other really positive thing about this election, and that's very different from any other election we've had, is the behavior of the state. It's been pretty much invisible, throughout. Um, there's been no stories of, police tear gassing, beating up protesters, and stuff like that. You had, even when you had problems with bombers, you could see the restraint on the part of the police inside the hall. Bombers is where the counting was happening. You could see the restraint of the police, and I think that is another really positive thing that we should insist that becomes another bar for police behavior, and not just during elections, but in their interactions with citizens. That I think this has shown what is possible. And I think many Kenyans are going to be expecting that now this becomes the new way of doing things. I would say in terms of the state, I've got a conspiracy theory on that. In 2018, when they had an agreement between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, which is famously called the handshake. I had interpreted that to essentially be that Odinga was giving Kenyatta some peace for his final term, and in return, the state would pretty much guarantee that he would win the election, in the sense that they would deliver it for him. I think lots of people expected that to happen in this election, and it didn't. And I think a big question I think political analysts and historians might want to take up later on, or even start to think about now, is, did Kenyatta essentially play Raila Odinga? Did he promise him he would deliver victory, and then at the last minute kind of dropped him? I think that's going to be an interesting question to sort of to think about in the coming days.
Absolutely. Well, you've left us with a lot to think about. I really love how this was such a substantive discussion, but you've also given us some glimmers of hope and issues to look at, and even a conspiracy theory thrown in there at the end for all of us to dive into and talk about in our circles. So our time, unfortunately, has come to an end, but we will, of course, keep in touch with you, Patrick, and follow your excellent work. We really appreciate your time and all that you are doing to make Kenya a better place and to credibly inform global audiences. That's why we wanted to have you on. We definitely need more like you. So thanks so much for your time. And of course, Thank you to our audience for always tuning in. We hope to keep seeing you here in the future as we have some excellent full-length Resistance Bureau shows coming up soon. You can stay in touch with us in the meantime by visiting our website, theresistancebureau.com, and by subscribing on our homepage to receive email newsletters that include really great show summaries, participant videos, and also some suggested reading so that you can learn more about the issues and the activists and human rights defenders that we spotlight here on the show. On our website, you can also revisit all of our past shows, which are free to download in the episode section. We also have active platforms on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Yes, we have all your bases covered. So thank you again for joining us today. To Patrick and to our global audience, we are truly, truly grateful. Please stay safe in the meantime. Keep fighting the good fight, and we will see you out there. Thanks so much.
Okay, bye.